Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Astrology Unplugged. Hey, everybody here live. Good to see you. And everybody out there in YouTube land, welcome. You can join us live on every other Thursday in the month. And in order to do that, you can go on Facebook and you can either follow me or the group Astrology Unplugged, because this is an open forum for anybody. And we talk about all kinds of good stuff on this show. So today let me backtrack. We talk about astrology mainly, but we also have many other topics that are of a spiritual nature usually, or development, personal development,
Healing.
healing. Oh yeah, all those topics. And in fact, we're excited about bringing some of those to this group, and kind of
Into the public.
yeah, into the public. Right. So my name is Claudia and this is Rick, my co-pilot. And tonight we're going to talk about emotional intelligence, something that I've always been really passionate about, even at a very young age. And now at my age, I'm even more passionate about it, because just when you think, you've got something figured out, you don't. So I'm finding right now I need this talk tonight just as much as I'm going to share my thoughts about it. Like, you never stop learning. And it's also a topic that I think Dr. John, who's with us, is very passionate about, and so is Rick. And in particular, I'm so interested in hearing their perspective from the male view. But really, this is for everybody. It's obviously for everyone. It's just something that I think is really kind of pertinent to the male audience. And that's just my personal opinion. So I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. And
While you're getting that ready, I will say, Jane, I am especially curious to hear, after we start discussing American culture, what your experience is with Australian culture in regard to male experiences, as you have observed. I know you're not a gentleman, but you've observed.
I think it's a pretty, there's definitely a backlash from men against, well, I think it's similar in a lot of ways in America, because we have a lot of those really anti-women or misogynists on social media really pushing that. I think it's really hard for young men because I think it's a confusing time. I think it's always been hard for women, but I just really feel I can see there are more and more beautifully positive men coming out onto social media doing some great stuff. I don't know if they're getting heard, across the board. We've just had our elections for the next prime minister and whatever, party they are. That's been announced just this morning, the elections will be on the 5th of May. And we've got a more moderate prime minister now, which I love. And we've got a very right-wing, I love Trump guy that's running. I mean, he pretends he doesn't, but it's very, yeah. And very, a lot of the sort of campaigns that Trump does, yeah, I feel that this guy, Peter Dutton, is on that same page-ish, not as radical, but there's that feeling. And we've got a billionaire who always runs with a party, and I won't talk long, you guys, but he runs with a party, and he puts millions into running with a party. And I think this time he's called it the Trumpeter. Oh, it's a weird name because he wanted to use the word Trump in it. Because he's really, really wants, it to be a male-dominated universe and anti anything to do with our Indigenous people. Just, yeah. So it feels like it's similar. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But it's a bit, it's gentler because we have a gentler a society because we have Medicare, we have great health care and things like that. But anyway, so yeah, there's
Yeah.
similarities.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Because this is a worldwide, this is not unique to us
The
here.
US.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So if I can move my slides. Okay. Actually, before we begin, I was talking to Rick, and he actually, when we look at the title of this slide, the 5 components of emotional intelligence, as defined by Daniel Goleman, who wrote a really pretty famous, one of the first books on emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
There you go. I knew, yep.
Yeah, right here. Literally titled Emotional Intelligence.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But before, I believe he wrote it, I want to say in the 90s or in the 80s.
Published in 95.
Okay. There were some people that came before him and kind of brought this term to us. Do you want to
Right.
tell us about those? I think it was
Y-
2 people.
Yes. Let me pull that back up. I just have to find the place where I put it. There it is. No, that's not it.
I mean, if you'd like me to jump in and add, I think he's the one that really, you know, how like sometimes we have people who mention it or who come up with the concept, and that's awesome. And then there's just like that one person who writes the one book, and that sort of is the one that leaks into the public consciousness, though, or it's like the seventh
Right.
thing. But
Yes.
I think he's the one that gets
I think
attributed with
he,
the
right.
Yeah.
modern concept of emotional intelligence. But yeah, so of course there were others who discussed it even before he did.
Peter Salovey
Yes.
and John D. Mayer, they coined the term in 90. And prior to that work, we had um, Claude Steiner, who is an interesting individual because you can actually find his chart available online. And I immediately had some thoughts of, well, he's born in 1935 and Pluto was discovered in 1930. So I thought, oh, I wonder what was going on between the two charts, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he was, he is a French-born American who was born of Austrian parents in Paris, France in 1935, and they were fleeing Hitler's impending invasion because he had a Jewish mother and a Christian father. And he later met and took a few pages out of Dr. Eric Burns' book, or became a disciple after 1957 of his. And then around the time of 1965, after the publication of Games People Play by Byrne, Steiner got his PhD in clinical psychology. So
Mm-hmm.
he has uh, a strong influence that is, and I think it's really interesting. We have several people that come out of World War II. Um, I'm thinking of the logotherapy uh, gentleman, the meaning of, oh, his name is escaping me now, but it's another
Frankel.
well-known. Thank you, Viktor Frankl.
Frankel, rather, yeah. My friend was just reading that book right now. We were talking about it.
Yeah, logotherapy is the concept that he coined. It basically relates
Man's search for
resilience.
meaning.
Thank you. The search for meaning. Man's search for meaning. It was the one book that my son sneaked out of my library. What a good thing to have happen, right?
Yes.
And his concept was to find purpose in your
Mhm.
experience.
Mhm.
That was the idea behind logotherapy.
Yeah.
So I just thought, as a kicker, it would be nice to go ahead and share some simple definitions so we're on the same page.
Mhm.
Emotional intelligence is recognized as the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and emphatically. Emotional intelligence is the key to both personal and professional success. I believe that is also echoed through the work of Goleman. And then emotional literacy. I don't know where I put my definition for it, but I have this intriguing question that highlights nuances. It's, what is the difference between emotional intelligence and emotional literacy? Emotional intelligence focus more on the judgment of emotional intellect and examples of how you can demonstrate your level. Emotional intelligence has been developed with various thought leaders, taking it in various directions, but it is ambiguous in parts. Emotional literacy is about development and specificity. So
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense, because when you consider the literacy component, you're truly looking at a proficiency level that allows you the facility to work with whatever you are literate in. Like a Lyme
Right.
literate doctor treats Lyme disease, you know,
Right.
or a trauma literate therapist would be focused and skilled with trauma issues. So being skilled with emotional development and specificity, which kind of will not surprise you folks that you see things that I've been talking about as their components when we were talking about resilience later on in the presentation slides.
Yeah.
They're quite interesting. And
Yeah, but it's one thing to be aware of that emotional component in yourself, and then another thing to practice it and live it.
Right.
I'm a I can be a good example of that because I can look at this and go, wow, I really need to work on this and this and this and this. But I understand it, like in my thinking mind, in my logical mind. But it's very different. Like if I got into an argument with a loved one, or if I got into a heated situation, uh, to actually practice those things. It it takes a lot of presence and mindfulness, I think. And I think
Yeah.
Erica probably knows because she's laughing because she knows.
Everything goes out the door the minute you get hot under the collar, right? It's like, oh my God, I forgot all that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've been a poster child for that lately. I mean, truly. I'm even shocked at my own self. So let's take it from the first point. Self-awareness. The ability to recognize and understand your own emotions, strengths, and weaknesses. So I think the key word there is recognize. And it sounds really obvious, but it isn't. When you're dealing with, we're all different. We all have different backgrounds, we all have different traumas, we all have different experiences. And then you meet somebody and it really, you go, wow, you mean you don't realize that? It doesn't occur to them. Certain things just don't occur to them. They don't experience the world in the same way. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's just they're different. And so to recognize your own emotions and strengths and weaknesses is you're already, you've already got a leg up. In my last interview, my last job interview, I had gone through a series of interviews, and then I was getting to the higher level person, and she I don't know, I asked her a question. Oh, I asked her about what do you think is really key for this role? And something like that. And she said, just self-awareness. And I was really happy and impressed that she said that, because I thought it was going to be something a lot more corporate or different. Uh, but it's true. If you can't recognize the things and the way that you are and your own emotions and inner life, how, number one, it limits you in the rest of the list here, but two, you can't see it in other people. You know, you that saying that you can only give what you have. You can only offer what you have. Um,
Very true.
yeah.
I would also suggest, if you're trying to help other people to understand this, I think, in fact, I'm confident that I like the word identify better than recognize, because recognition can be a little hazy. Identify shows that you had a feeling and you took the time to put the label on it. Because you have to go ahead and be open to recognize this life experience is nudging me. I don't think it's a thought. I believe it is a feeling. I have an emotion about this. That's where the difference is with the identification. Is it an
Right.
idea or a feeling? And this is emotional intelligence. That's why I think it is tricky for those who think first, then feel. Because this requires you must feel first to understand and then think.
Yes. I see that. I see that distinction. And it's probably something that starts to happen. Like I've seen it with my own kids really start to develop, well, I can't say this because my oldest is 28. So she's actually in her Saturn return right now. So she's really growing up, actually growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have older kids than that. Maybe some of you that do have way older kids, but now I see the difference with them, like being aware of, oh yeah, I do that.
Yeah, I'd like to speak into some of that, Claudia.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think, from hi everybody, just I mean, I know you know me at this point, but I mean, we really don't teach a lot about emotional intelligence. Like my experience is that it's something that's fairly new, like
Mhm.
as far as like
Yes.
really, really scratching the surface of education and just general awareness that we're creating for it. So I think, what you're saying,
Mhm.
Claudia, about your oldest daughter being 28 and coming into it, like, I mean, what that kind of suggests to me is it's like we kind of stumble into it sometimes in life if and it may be much later than 40. I mean, I'm giving my own age away, but I mean it may be much later than 28 years old,
Right.
Saturn return, for you to really discover it. Though I mean, for me, I literally turned 40 the
Yeah.
moment it kind of hit me, and it's, oh
Yeah.
wow.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah,
Well, if
it's and
Saturn
we can talk
return
more about
doesn't get you,
it.
Uranian opposition usually does.
I think it was Pluto, my Pluto square, that started it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Erica
And
has a thought she'd like to share.
Um, yeah, I was thinking about one of the possible reasons why people don't think before they react and they just automatically react. In our culture, I have recently read that in Japanese culture, when people talk to each other, they're usually like 10 seconds or longer of silence before the next person speaks.
really,
And in our
That's beautiful.
culture, we talk over each other. So when is the time to think about you're just reacting and reacting, and sometimes to your lowest
Yeah.
possible level, depending on what buttons they're pushing and whether you've meditated before this conversation. So, you know, and it's good to say, you have to think before you feel, but a lot of times we just get triggered, we feel, and then we blurt out stuff that we, put our foot in our mouth. And if
Sure.
we're able to wait a second and let the other person have some breathing space, like the Japanese do, maybe we could avoid that.
I want to say something real fast to that, Erica. I think of two things here. One, Rick DiClemente saying "Ready, fire, aim." Two, the Sagittarius ascendant of the United States chart makes us. I think that implies that we are a loud and boisterous people, and we don't have a whole lot of comfort with silence. We have to fill it with noise and
Yeah.
and be loud and in your face, whereas I think Japan and many other countries wouldn't necessarily have that ascendant and would probably be a lot more comfortable with space.
Yeah.
Americans are very uncomfortable with silence and giving room for other
Yes.
people to speak.
Well, that explains something that I was thinking about as I listened to what Erica was saying about a 10-second silence or pause.
Hmm.
Eventually we get to the space where we're talking about active listening. In taking a structured active listening course, there was absolutely time spent not listening while thinking of what you're going to say next, but trying to process what is being shared with you by someone else.
Right. Right.
So there's a different perspective on what your quiet is occupied with. Are you actually listening, or are you strategizing to militarize your next thought?
I have a pet peeve of mine, which is, and I have done this with Rick Cempie here. I have been multitasking while I talk to him, and I'm aware of it, and I don't like it because when I'm on the phone with somebody, I want to be present with them. I don't want to be cooking or doing something else. I want to be present with them because maybe it's just me, but I feel like I need to like absorb it, and it's something that I really have to work on. I don't have to work on it, but sometimes you're busy in your day, or like for example, my daughter was talking to me last night, and she was, I don't know, whatever she was talking about. She was talking about her horses, and I heard my phone ringing, and I really wanted to go get it, and then I was having all these thoughts, and I was like, listen to her, just be here with her, just listen. And I see her every day. I talk to her every single day. But it's so special to be able to me, it's very special to be able to absorb somebody else's thoughts and what they feel about something. And I don't want to take that for granted. Because we do sometimes in our everyday lives. I see my daughter every day. We talk every day. So it's easy for me to go, yeah, I'll talk to you later. But having that awareness helps a whole bunch. And Linda and Marsha, it's really good to see you both. And May, it's good to see you, even though I can't see you, it's good to see you. um, let's move to number 2, unless anybody has anything they want to add. Yes, ma'am, please. Oh, you muted yourself, Marsha.
Okay, now good.
Yeah.
Today I read something about Helen Keller
Uh-huh.
about 100 years ago. She was listening to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. And the way she listened to the symphony is she sat in front of the big radio that they used to have. She had her hand in front of the speaker
Yeah.
at the radio. And she felt all the energy of the different instruments. She described them, the way that she interpreted them.
Right.
She described, I guess the way the music went up and down.
Mm-hmm.
It was incredible just to, and I'm kind of like thinking about her and the discussion we're having, that
Yeah.
she had, all she had was the time to do this and listen.
Yeah.
And the way she described it was with absolute beauty.
Oh,
It was
I'm
astounding.
sure. Yeah. I'm
To
sure.
go ahead and find such nuances of vibration has to suggest a significant articulates in her mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I guess some of it is just having to have time, and we don't seem to have time.
No.
Everything.
Well,
is just
mindfulness
so
makes that an issue
mindfulness.
too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, Deborah.
I just wanted to say I'm thinking more academically here, but when I look at number one, the ability to recognize and understand your own emotions and strengths and weaknesses, you can't, that can't be a priori to every discussion. Well, it can be, but sometimes a discussion is just in the moment.
Mhm.
And I think what this means is so you might have the ability in the midst of a discussion to recognize that that's what this means to me, to recognize in the midst of a discussion and then self-correct a little bit. And
Yes.
as you were describing
Yes.
with your daughter. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
throw that in. I think it's a reflective
Yeah.
as it applies to number one.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, it's something we have to develop, right? Because, you
Yeah.
know, as we know, a 3-year-old is just going to feel and do and say and act the way he or she wants to. That they're not going to say, whoa, wait a minute. What I meant to say was, you know, they're not going to do that. But then as we grow up, we realize that I guess it's the nature of a child to think that really it's about they're in themselves so much and in the moment. But as we grow up, we realize the consequences of everything. You know, if we were to say and blurt and act the way we wanted to all the time, can you imagine? Some of us it would be hurtful. There would be consequences. It would not be good. So recognizing that is, I think it makes our world better and us. So thanks, Deborah. Self-regulation. I hear a lot about this lately. A lot. Because I follow a lot of people that are into this kind of thing on social media. And this is a very important topic for me because I have trouble sometimes. But
Quite a buzzword lately.
yeah, and I think it's connected to our nervous system as well. Our nervous system is, as we know, rules so much of, well, it rules a lot of our brain activity and how we
Choices.
say and how we act. So the capacity to manage emotions effectively, staying in control and adapting to changing circumstances. So I like that definition. I don't like that definition because by nature, sometimes emotions can be really messy. But I think learning, you know, sometimes anger is it's not that anger is in and of itself a bad thing, or tears are a bad, it's not. It's sometimes when you're either in a destructive pattern or out to hurt someone, and you know it, we all know it, you know when you're doing something that is not your best self, that is not in the highest good for you and somebody else. You can feel it. But it's something that I've always try to work on, because I have a lot of water in my chart. And I just realized this right before I was getting on tonight with you guys. So later on, we'll look at a little bit of astrology and how it connects to emotional intelligence. And I have a T-squared of Mercury in Cancer. So my thinking is so subjective. Mercury in Cancer is this, and it's at 29 degrees. So what I'm trying to say here is, like, I really have to be quite aware, because I know I can fly off the handle like that. And it doesn't appear to people that I get like this, but I can.
Well, you're still a fire sign, Claudia. You're still
Right.
Leo, so you do have that fire.
Yeah.
Anger is tied in with that very
And
closely.
then but then we'll also see later, I have squares to my moon that are from Mars and from Neptune. So not easy placements for this emotional intelligence stuff, which maybe that's why I've been so interested in it, because I know how much I need to work on it.
Well, if I can jump in with
Yeah.
yeah, about the self-regulation piece, I am, and I'll share one of the things we can talk about, the actual work that I've done, but I've done a number of these trainings that have been like the focus has been on emotional intelligence, and
Yeah.
and this is even something I know like Rick C and I have talked about, just the challenges of being a young man. And I know I had anger issues. I don't look like it. I don't sound like it. I think I get angrier than probably what I show, because I have this, I'm an earth guy, but I've got a lot of fire planets too. They
Yeah.
just usually show up more on an internal level than internal, but it's like, what do you do with this? A lot of us, we learn at a young age, anger is destructive and it's bad and it will hurt you or others. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I learned to do is stuff it down. Well, that doesn't do you any good. It just explodes in other ways.
Yeah.
So one of the you could call him like the teacher, facilitator, trainer of one of the workshops I did, said that, hey, look, anger actually isn't a bad thing. Just like you said, Claudia, it's like a signal to tell you something's wrong.
Yes.
And it's how
Yes.
you choose to
Much
respond
like
with that anger.
pain.
Absolutely, Rick. Yeah. What you choose to do with it at that moment is, can make all the difference. And that ties back in with the self-awareness piece, that it's all about just being aware. Like you feel this, okay, I'm angry. Why am I angry? And you stop, oh, because of this. But what is that really tied to? Like if you can hold it out and take a look at it, then maybe you don't act on it. And there's a difference even with that between anger and rage, which is just blind raging destructive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
And
Erica shared an interesting comment of how this part of our discussion reminds of the trouble people with profound autism have to deal with,
mhm,
because they can't recognize emotions in others versus themselves.
mhm, mhm.
That's definitely a very fair observation
Yeah.
and reality.
Yeah. Mhm.
I can't
Absolutely.
Mhm.
speak too much on it, because I don't know much about it. I mean, I've been around, but I've been around kids that are autistic, and I can't imagine from their perspective, it's got to be quite overwhelming, isolating at times, just not being able, because we're such relational beings. Uh, all of us. I mean,
Humanity.
yeah, we weren't designed to just be one man on an island. So that's a whole, we could probably, that's a whole other side of this that is really key. And I have to tell you, I don't know about you, but autism seems to be something that just seems more and more on the rise.
Well, and there are more people that experience it than everybody realizes because of
Mhm.
Asperger's
Uh-huh.
being part of
Right.
that spectrum, and the higher functioning form of autism, such as it is, they can be incredibly intelligent and detail oriented and focused and astounding.
Oh, yeah,
Um, so yeah.
right.
So we should probably move through these with a little bit more like, let's hit the definitions of the group of topics, and then maybe one or two people could say something about one or the other
So the next
comment.
one is, an inner drive to motivation or resilience, an inner drive to pursue goals with energy and persistence, often linked to passion and purpose, which kind of speaks for itself, but that, and I mean, I dare say that's even, the motivation is even, it can be tied to passion and purpose, but just functioning in society. Because if you're having a bad day, if you're, I don't know, if you lost your dog, or uh, you yet you still have to make dinner for your family or something. It's that resiliency to go, you know what, I need to get up, or I need to still function. um, it's a big deal. It doesn't seem like a big deal until you've run out and you're completely empty, kind of when you're in a depressed state. If you ever watch anybody that's been depressed, just taking a shower is a big to do. It's a big task. Just putting a shirt on is a big task. It's because it's like you're just drained of. I
Yeah, it absolutely can be, Claudia. There's two things I feel called to share here. One is, again, one of the big pieces that I learned, through my work with emotional intelligence was one, the power of having a why. I think what's it, Simon Sinek, who wrote the book, Power of Why, like, I think he was author of it, but just basically getting
Yeah.
clear, having a purpose that drives you. So even when it's storming out, even when, it seems like the whole world is falling apart, you still have this that inspires
Yes.
you to go out and, do whatever.
Right.
The other piece of that is the power of interpretation that, and Rick C and I spoke about this too, that, one of the exercises, I don't think I can share this. I don't think it's really giving anything away, but it's basically like taking that, like, your dog died. Sadly, if you have a pet, unfortunately, you're going to have that moment. Or losing a relative, losing a loved one. And it's like, you're going through the motions, and it's like, well, how
Mhm.
do I deal with this? I have to get up and go to work the next day. And so
Right.
it's like, do you interpret it as like, I have to do it? Oh, it's horrible. Or do you
Yes.
stop and think, like, what can I be in gratitude for? Like, I have a job. I have a reason to get up and go to work every day. And like, that's something I'll like think of the people I'll see. And yeah, I'm not saying gloss over the misery and the gloss over the pain, but it's like choosing,
Yes.
in everything, every moment, we do have a choice to, with what we do with the emotions we have, the experience we have, and that ties back into self-awareness. It ties back into, okay, this is what I'm feeling.
Yes.
What does this mean? And can I choose to do something with it? And can I choose something
Yeah.
else in that moment too?
I love that, John, because I've been doing that lately actively, because I have different situations that have come up, and I always say to myself, how can I look at this differently? Because
Um, Claudia, if John, while he brought that up, could expound on the gradients of have to, get to, want to, blessed to,
Yeah,
I
Mhm.
think that would be
Yeah,
helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So the exercise that we did, and that's not giving anything away, but it's just basically, let's just take a scenario again. You have to get up and go to work. For whatever reason, let's just say Monday, because everybody loves Monday. And you're like, oh, I have to get up. I have to brush my teeth. I have to get dressed. I have to get in the car. Have to sit through 30 to 45 an hour worth of traffic, and it's horrible. And it's just like our words have so much power.
Yeah.
And if we use words, if we think about things a certain way, that will affect our reality. So we go from, so literally in the exercise, the facilitator or the trainer challenges you to think, well, what if we use a different word rather than have to? What if we use get to? Like, how does that sound? And it's like, get to. Well, you get to do this. Okay, well, that feels a little bit better, right? You get to brush your teeth. You get to
Mhm.
get up out of bed. You get to
Mhm.
go outside and, oh, the sun's shining. You get to experience the sun. How many people don't get out of bed and how many people can't move, that sort of thing. So
Yes.
we go up to want to, which is even better still. And like
Right.
you want to do this, and then ultimately they kind of throw you a curve at the end. The trainer does. And he's like, "Well, what if it was a bless to? How does that
Oh,
feel?" And the story that, gets used or, that this one particular facilitator used is that I believe it was either a brother or a friend of his that was in the hospital and he was dying and and the guy was there to see him and everything like, hey, like I'm here for you. And the guy's like, the guy who's in lying on his deathbed is, still aware, still, coherent, lucid and everything like that. And he just says, I wish I could be in traffic. Like, I mean, like if I could do one
oh,
thing, I wish I could be in traffic. I don't care if it's wall to wall, bumper to bumper, because that would mean I'm still going somewhere. I'd have
wow.
someplace to be.
Yes.
Wow.
And so it's a gratitude piece. It's really just like being aware of like, hey, like
Yeah.
this is a blessing. Even the worst thing that happens to you, you have emotions. You can feel this. You're alive.
Yeah.
And again,
Oh,
not glossing
yes.
over the pain or, tragedy
No, I
of it,
get
but
it.
that you
I get
can,
it.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
I love that.
Uh,
Thank you for that. My daughter said to me today, uh, she said, I'm really glad that I went through this and this and this and this because now I really appreciate a hot shower. I really appreciate a car that drives well. I really appreciate whatever. And I was like, oh, she's really growing up. She's really growing up because
yeah.
she said that to me the other day too, John. She goes, I said, I have to go to work and I have to do blah, blah, blah. And she's not normally like this. She's really kind of quite cynical. She goes, what about if you say you get to? And
Yeah,
it totally changes your perspective.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Words have meaning.
Oh, so powerful.
They shape our
So
reality. So yeah, imagine if
brilliant.
along the same lines, if you tell yourself over and over again, I can't, I'm miserable, I'm awful, this, and that, like you're gonna like, it not only like brings your energy level down, but like you're programming yourself
That's right.
Yes.
to,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
your body will hear this and then it will respond in kind. You'll make yourself sick. People who say these things, who internalize these things, I mean, I think there are studies out there that show that people, have lower health expectancies, just like all these bad things tend to come out in these situations, though. Whereas if you have this more optimistic, like uplifting experience,
Mhm.
you'll recover from illness faster, you'll heal faster, you'll just like your whole outlook on life changes and you draw
Yes.
circumstances to yourself that reflect that. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Jane?
Yes, Miss Jane.
Yeah, no, I was just going to share something that happened many, many years ago. I went through quite a bit of depression, and I remember the year that I decided, after listening to a neuroscientist and talking about being able to change your brain, and I did a 21-day gratefulness thing. And
Mhm.
I honestly, I had two doctors that told me, they were married and they were at our little country town here. They told me I would never get off antidepressants. And that was
Oh,
like, right. I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah.
And I haven't been on one ever since. And that was 2013. And it really worked. And now I am so grateful that we'll all have our downtimes, but I know it's not going to last. And even if it goes a little bit longer than usual,
Yeah.
there's this sense, well, I can actually work on waking up, and like you were talking about with have to, but go, great, I'm awake. It's like we talked about having my birthday yesterday to you. I mean, no, yesterday for me, today for you, 27th of March. I love that I've turned 68 instead of going, oh, I'm getting old. It's just this lovely sense of going, yay, wow. So yeah, just thought I'd throw that in.
You get
that
to.
I've experienced,
Absolutely.
I've
Yes.
experienced that thing, John, where I've used that, and I do it now. You know, I will go, okay, stop. You've got to. The words now need to
You
turn
catch
to
it.
positive. To positive, yeah. So thank you.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
awesome, Jay. Wow.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool.
That's
Beautiful.
fantastic.
In action, in effect. You're
Mhm.
living it.
Totally. Yeah. That's wonderful. So the next one is probably a quality that we're all, being in this group, probably all familiar with, and that's empathy. And empathy is something that I think has come even more to the forefront in the last few years as well, in terms of, not in our world, but in leadership, and really how important it is. And it's not this woo-woo thing that it was years ago. So the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, fostering stronger social connections. And to some of us, this is so natural. This is so like we live in that world. God bless you. And for others, it's something that, can be developed if they choose to. It's To me, it's the kind of like the invisible glue that really connects us in a very meaningful way. It could be with a stranger in an elevator, or it could be with your mom. And,
Mhm.
some of us are so empathic that you have to be careful to not really make your stuff mine. That's a different conversation altogether. But empathy is pretty key when it comes to this, because if you do not, and I've been around people, maybe one or two people tops, and you see what a lack of empathy looks like in a human being, and it's scary, it's alarming, you can't understand it, because they really, they just don't have, it's like it's a missing thing somewhere, which
You
is
certainly
foreign.
don't want
No,
game night with them, let alone vacation.
no, no. And it's a whole different world that yeah, people like that, those are not my people. Erica, go ahead.
I once looked up the difference between sympathy and empathy because I always thought they were the same thing. And I was surprised to find out that sympathy is where you feel sorry for something that happened to someone and you send them a sympathy card and all this type of thing. But empathy is where you're actually willing to feel what they're going through. And that's probably why a lot of people don't want to go there, because they're afraid of those feelings.
Yes.
So they'd rather just have sympathy and then leave it at that.
Yeah.
I
could
think
see
too,
that.
there's elements that have driven it out of our society, because it was at one point in the DSM here in the US listed as a trait of a disorder.
Mm.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So it was vilified.
Hmm.
And we basically moved it out of the culture.
Yeah.
it doesn't make it easier when you have genders in conflict because they don't understand one another. It makes it even harder when the um, the guys are thought to have no empathy. It's just that expression is the big problem.
Right. That's so good. That's so
Yeah.
good, Rick.
And
Yes.
there is a segment that kind of wants things to be that way, that thinks that you're, I mean, and again, Rick, you and I have discussed this, like, I mean, especially for our men these days, many men feel like to show empathy, like that's feminine, that's a weakness, that's not a masculine,
Mhm.
manly thing to do, which, you know, I believe, and I know you do too, that nothing could be further from the truth. Like a
Mhm.
healthy masculinity and femininity does involve empathy, does involve showing compassion, doesn't involve showing kindness, walking
Yeah.
in somebody else's shoes, trying to
Yep.
relate to, openly relating to somebody else, rather than making it a bad thing. No, I can't do that. That's,
Yes.
you know, thoughts and prayers, as Linda put in the chat. Uh,
Right.
so glad it's not me, you know, that
Yeah.
mentality is
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. The last one, social skills, or at least the last one on this list, proficiency in managing relationships, communicating effectively, and resolving conflicts. This is also one I think that can be, I guess all this stuff can really be developed, but as adults, even as adults, like I have my son, uh a few years ago, I remember him getting a job because he thought he really needed to kind of improve on his social skills because he's really kind of more introverted, and the job has helped a lot. And I was highly impressed that he would even say that, because I didn't know he was aware of the fact that social skills was something that he realized was really kind of, it's really important. It's really, it's important if you're, I guess sounds bad, but if it's not your thing, that's when it becomes important. Because even though it's important all the time, when you're aware that, oh, I'm so uncomfortable in this situation, or I don't know how to communicate even simple things, for some of us, that comes really naturally. That's just like, that's just you being you.
Mhm.
But if you don't, it can be really difficult. So I gave him a lot of credit there, and he kind of pushed himself in that way, and it's really helped. But even me, and I'm like always checking myself, especially not in this environment, but in my day job and in my grown-up world, how I come across and how I communicate and how I handle my relationships. I try to be very conscious of it, not like robotic or anything, but just I try to be really conscious of it, because I don't know, it's just I find it's really important to foster the right kind of relationship. Like, for example, I have somebody in my work life who I really don't get along with. I don't get along with at all. I mean, it's fine, there's no tension outwardly, but I would not, have coffee with her. But I have to learn how to deal with that relationship, and
Mhm.
not react to how I think what she's giving off. Um, these are like these are really big, important things that we face in the adult world, and we face them all the time. I mean, do you like everybody you meet? Do you get along with everybody you meet? Is everybody nice to you? Are you nice to everybody? You see a lot of rude people, you see a lot of that. So we always practice this stuff. Like it doesn't matter what, you're at the gas station, you're at work, you're with your husband, you're here, it's always. Um, but it's part of this whole topic, which I'm glad it's getting more and more attention, because you're right, John, it's relatively still kind of new, you know. It's, whether I think he wrote the book in 95 or 90, you said, Rick. That's
95.
95.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's really kind of, it's still quite new. So I'm gonna,
Yeah, and it's becoming, I think it's gradually becoming more mainstream. And
yeah.
Rick and I talked about this earlier in the week, but we like in my experience as an educator, I mean, for those of you who don't know that I've, have been a teacher and a school administrator, principal, we're really just scratching the surface of emotional intelligence. I mean, it boils down to basically asking people to rate themselves on a scale of like 1 to 5 in meetings or whatever like that. And I'm not knocking it. I mean, I think that's a good starting point, but it's like it's just like you're not even leaving a dent in the surface. There's so many other places you can go with this, though. But the other thing that I would share is that the Goldman is tied to Daniel Goldman here, who wrote this book, is tied to the Castle Foundation. It's castle.org, CASEL, where there's a ton of like, I think basically everything that you have up on the slide here, Claudia, is on this
Oh,
website. And
nice.
that's like the foundation. That's like, it's a nonprofit organization. It's been around
Uh-huh.
since around the time he wrote this book.
Yep.
And they're basically trying to promote this awareness of social emotional learning, or what, in education's known for short as SEL. And it's, not to go off on a tangent, but it is interesting that there's been sort of a, this sort of like conservative reactionary pushback against this, though. And it's like, I think all of us here looking at this is like healthy, this is good. People are
This is
actually able to
healthy.
like connect with their emotions and not like bottle this stuff up and give themselves
Oh, yeah.
cancer because they're like bottling all this anger and
Yes.
self-hate and everything, though. But
Hmm.
there is a cycle, I think, of which it is going to become more and more uh,
I think
a
you're right.
thing. And just to tie in some astrology with this too, Rixie and I discussed this, that, it does seem like it was born, I'd say our modern, I know there's Steiner that was back in the 30s, though, and maybe that's a tie-in with Pluto, since Pluto was
Well, that
discovered
was his birth.
1930. Yeah. But in the 1960s, mid 1960s, we know that we had the Uranus Pluto conjunction, the current cycle we're in, and that was in Virgo. And we all know the 1960s was, I mean, we think about civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, all the things that happened around that time. But there were a lot of other gifts that it gave us too, and emotional intelligence is one of those pieces. And I
Mm,
think with the recent Uranus Pluto square that we had in the 2010s, 2012 to 2015, and then, wider if we use a wide orb, that I think it kind of hit its next level, next, I guess you could say going from, seasonal, from spring to summer. So we're in the summer now of, I think, emotional intelligence really starting to flourish. And I think we'll see that continue, over the next 20 or so years until we get to
yeah.
the opposition, the full moon in the
Oh, yeah.
2030s.
Oh, for sure. I think we're just at the beginning. And I like what I think it was Jane that said she's definitely seeing more awareness around the male population having more awareness, which I find too, Jane. I think it depends on your algorithm, but at least on mine, I'm finding that there's a lot more. There's younger men in their 20s and 30s, definitely 40s, that are speaking in a way that is really, they're embodying this stuff and they're really trying, they're really making an effort because they see how destructive it is. It's out of whack, it's out of balance. No human being, man or woman, um, is meant to repress so much. And we repress our boys and we condition them to, be productive and be providers, but this nurturing side of them, we kind of, that's for the girls, when that's not true at all. That's just what we've put on them. So guess what happens? Then you have a boy that grows up in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, and he can't relate emotionally as well, but also has his own stuff that he's not aware of, he can't feel, and he certainly can't express. And I think that causes that's a rub in relationally speaking. They become fathers.
Yeah.
your
I
boss.
think too, we can't
Yeah.
underestimate the harmful impact when we look at school shootings.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's
I think that has a lot to do with that and the shortfall of the mental health care
Yep.
and the mental health services. But to
Yeah.
not give children, where, make no mistake, boys prior to the age of 7 are more expressive.
Mm-hmm.
They are more in touch with their emotions.
Mhm.
It is a socialization as to what is deemed acceptable masculine role models of
Right.
choice that are overt. So the nice guy who's quiet can still be very masculine, but is not front and center getting attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's where the problem is. We need to be validating appropriate expressions of healthy emotions in an active way. This is why
Absolutely.
we were called upon. I remember seeing the first commercial ever suggesting that we teach our children emotional literacy. And my first question was, wonderful, who's going to teach the men?
Yeah. I think maybe we get to, Rick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would just chime in with this too, that I think there's, one of the key pieces I ultimately got out of my work and, all the workshops and trainings that I did was literally authenticity. And that's like that, like when that came to me, it was like, oh, wow, really? Like, where have I not been authentic in, many ways? And I think it was just, and I think this is something all of us experience on some level. Like, speaking to what you said, Rick, like, young boys and girls, all go through this period where you're young, you have your feelings, you express yourself, and then at a certain point, we say, well, at least to our boys, okay, now you have to suck it up. You can't, boys don't cry, like men
Yep.
don't cry. So don't let me see those tears. That's not being a man. And then you get that and you internalize that. And so it's like, what do we create? We create a culture of inauthenticity. We create a culture where people can't express their
Yeah.
feelings and emotions. Girls have to be a certain way, boys have to be a certain way, and there are
Yes.
these very
Yeah.
stifling social norms that we're dealing with, really to the point of being unhealthy,
Oh
and I
God,
think that's
yes.
where
It's
we get to take a
essentially
stand for
totally.
absolutely.
That's why, yes, totally. Essentially, it I think it comes down to you're not accepting this child exactly as they are, however that may be, a boy or a girl.
Well, perhaps uncomfortable. And that's if someone's uncomfortable in themselves, that
Mm,
Yes.
could be the root of a lack of acceptance.
Yes.
yeah,
So for those men who don't have a sense of self that is rooted in healthy minds, then they're going to have a struggle with the more emotional young boy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And oh, I've seen
And
that.
that doesn't look good to the child because the child sees through the lack of support, love, and it is uh, a recipe for inauthenticity.
yeah. Kids see these things, they
Oh
watch
yeah.
everything, they take in everything.
They will compartmentalize
Yeah.
Yeah.
as boys,
Yes.
as
It can be
humans.
really damaging because then they think I am not okay as I am. Or I'm supposed to be blah blah blah. They may not verbalize it, they may not say it outright, but inside they know. Oh, I mean, I have this in my own life, and it's so obvious, and with somebody in my life, and I just think, and the person really is not comfortable with themselves, so then they put that on the child.
Mhm.
You know, that child needs to be blah, blah, blah. That child is too sensitive. That child is, it's because that child is making them uncomfortable. You're right, Rick. You're totally right.
Well, they were never validated when they expressed emotions as a child themselves.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
had to survive that. It did not kill them, so it must be acceptable to perpetrate and continue and perpetuate.
Yeah. Yeah. Why don't we move on?
Would you like to jump to the astrological part at 10 after 8 as we are?
I'd love it.
Mhm.
I mean, so let's take a moment.
We can take a quick run through the other components.
Let's
just
take
to,
a minute. Why it
Yeah.
matters. And I think we all know why it matters.
Right.
Thanks, Erica. Right back at you. So yes, you're going to foster better relationships. And who doesn't want that? All relationships, you know?
Right.
Effective communication, we talked about that, absolutely. Stronger leadership, improved decision making, and resilience. And sometimes we're stronger in some of these areas than others. I think it's key to just, this is why when I look at people's charts, I always look at like their Saturn and their Pluto, and I look at the tough stuff first, because then I know where their lessons are and where, because it's easy, you know, like for me, you know, better relationships, that's easy. But, you know, maybe improve decision making. Well, I suck at that. I doubt my decisions or I question them, you know. So
Deborah, thank you so much for joining us while you could.
thank you, Deborah.
It was
Good to
great to
see you.
see
Good to
you.
have you. You're on
Nice to
mute.
see you, Deborah.
And anybody who has to leave, I wanted to throw a housekeeping thought out there. Feel free to go ahead and recognize you're going to have more thoughts about our topics, and go back when the video is posted and maybe bring some commenting up so that we can engage with our wider community more effectively. Just a thought that would really
Yes, I
improve
like it.
the interaction.
Yep. So I think we're all familiar with that. So let's go to that. Self-reflection, mindfulness, active listening, communication skills, and conflict resolution. These all seem quite obvious, right? But again, you know, I bet there's one or two that you might feel like, I can have an opportunity with that one, where I could improve there, or I can help someone else with it. Sometimes I think that's why the beauty in relationships is we help each other.
Mhm.
And that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. It doesn't matter who it is, you know. Linda's helping her students, and it's beyond academic. She's
Right.
helping them in other ways. John is doing the same thing. Erica, we're all helping each other in one way or another. And it may not be conscious, but we are. And sometimes I remember I had a boss that, I mean, this man was going through so much for like all the years I knew him, which was of many years. He had the weight of the world, and he came in every day. And it wasn't until he retired that I found this out. He said, I always want to be the person that feels like I get to be here, and I want to really be walk the talk. But I mean, I knew it because I kind of knew him personally, but he always he wanted to lead by example. And he did. I mean, he really did. So just him being himself helped others. He didn't even have to do or say anything actively. His presence in himself and how he conducted himself helped others. And I think that's what we're here to do with each other, right? Because there's things that come naturally to Marcia that don't come naturally to me, and vice versa. So there's that one. So I think now we're into astrology. So how is this connected? How do we connect this to astrology? This is pretty generalization, so you would know because you're part of this group that it really depends on your chart. But the moon is obviously the first thing when it comes to, our
The
awareness.
emotions.
And yes, our emotions, our internal life, and how we feel comforted and how we feel nurtured. And so, I don't know. So Rick, I think your moon is in Sagittarius. My moon is
Yes.
in Pisces. Those are very different. Like, so think about your moon. And I think about the moon is exalted in Taurus. So why would the moon be exalted in Taurus? It's a real question. And I
It's
I
think
think it would be the sensualness,
yeah,
the sense orientation of
groundedness,
Taurus.
groundedness too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So one thing I'm learning is that in order to really be present and listen and be regulated and aware, you really have to be in your body. If you're too much like out here, it's more of a sense of like, it's either dreaminess or anxiety or too much in the mind. You have to be grounded. But when I think about Taurus, they're usually not, it depends on the chart. For the most part, they're kind of like this,
You don't see a flighty Taurus.
exactly. You can,
pretty rare.
yeah, they can have strong emotions, and I'm not saying they don't, but when you think about the moon the moon is messy. It can be a lot of things, right? So when you have a moon that can be steady enough to deal with yourself and others, like in Taurus, that's what I would say. Yeah, I see why the correlation of it being exalted in Taurus, uh, because it's like this.
I think too, Claudia. I mean, it also shows up as look at our relationship between the sun and not the sun, but the moon and the earth itself. It's a very harmonious
Yeah,
relationship. We don't like the moon, affects our oceans and water and the tides and all that. But even with that, it's not like a devastating thing where we have earthquakes because the moon's moving a certain way. So it suggests
right.
that there's a flow, and even the way it interacts with the water representing emotion suggests that there's an expression of that, a healthy
Yeah,
expression of that.
it's a healthy expression. Yes,
Yeah.
it's not too much like a Cancer moon, maybe. Uh, and I'm not suggesting that if you have a moon in Cancer that you're just like, oh, crazed with emotion. I'm not at all suggesting that. I'm just saying that's a very different expression from, the moon being in a more steady state, and like connected to the earth, like John is saying. So a strongly placed moon enhances emotional intelligence. So in Cancer, Taurus, or the fourth house, which I've seen with people who have that. They can be, think about like if you had an emergency, right? If you had an emergency, let's talk about what that moon person would do or how they would respond to an emergency. Or when they're really doing very well, where they're happy and they feel good, what do they like to do? So that's what I think that's what's connecting the emotional intelligence, self-awareness. Stability is a great word when for the emotional um, life. A challenged moon, right? So like I talked about with me, it's afflicted by Saturn or Mars or in Scorpio. So it would be in Scorpio afflicted because it's the opposite of Taurus. So remember how I said it was exalted in Taurus? Well, the opposite would be in Scorpio. Scorpio can be suspicious. It can be distrustful.
It can
Those are
go
the
to dark
shallow.
places too,
Yeah,
Oh boy, can they?
right. So a moon in
in general.
Scorpio, even though it's a water moon, it's dark waters, right? And when you think about the moon placement in your chart, it's like it wants comfort and happiness and nurturing and just connectedness and goodness. It doesn't want to feel like, this guy's out to get me, and like it's got to fight with life. Afflicted by Saturn, that can be hard, that can be really hard. A square to Saturn, that can be really hard. Or any aspect in Saturn. But that can also be somebody that can take a lot, that can handle a lot.
I think too, the affliction from Saturn can really perhaps be exacerbated because the family of origin is going to have conflict that will be internalized in a child who has a Saturn moon affliction, because they're seeing mother's ways and father's ways in conflict. So
Yes.
that's going to make them see, how do we deal with structure and authority and nurturing and
Yeah.
childhood. It's very complicated to try and figure. It's way beyond the pay grade of a child.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would add Capricorn moon and Pluto aspects into that category too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. Pluto aspects to the moon. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's heaviness.
Yeah.
Let me take a minute and pause for a second. I want to kind of get a feeling for if you experience your moon connected to emotional intelligence in a difficult way, or are there times in your life where you've seen it as, a challenging thing, or has it helped? Your moon placement, has it helped? So how can you connect your moon placement to your level of emotional intelligence, or can you? So
I have to say, I wonder if it might not be best to consider it simply a component, because there are different pieces to the puzzle, just like you have different pieces to the SATs.
mhm,
And there are different things that are strong, but there are certainly weaknesses. So to go ahead and say, oh, my moon's solid, I've also worked with my moon.
right,
So I have overcome this Sagittarian, I'm going to jump on the horse and ride and let her rip and be freedom rolling and, let the fires burn the prairie. I don't care. I will say what I please. That has not been helpful. So, you know,
yeah,
but that's also something that was overcome.
yeah,
So it doesn't
sounds like
really
it.
matter what your chart is, as long as you have awareness and you work with it,
Yeah,
because the working with it is the more important thing. We talk about certain charts are described as lazy and some are uh, described as challenging. And truth be told, if you didn't have some challenges, you probably would make no success forging ahead. So it's a
right.
mix.
I kind of, I don't see a lot of lazy charts, but I have, and I think, wow, that's an interesting lifetime. Because
Well,
as you
Grand
go back,
Trine is considered to be a closed circuit where it provides, especially if it's a water trine, it
Oh
provides
yeah.
emotional fulfillment totally within your own headspace and heart and mind. So you don't need to have the connection with other. And that's why it's good to have the opposition to turn it into a kite, to give it something to have focus so that you're dealing with your own challenges and trying to connect with people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Whatever it is, doesn't make it good or bad if you have an awareness and work with it. This is why, part of why I'm just obsessed with astrology, because I see the things that it can help with. I see how it can transform your life completely. If you have that awareness. I have certain things in my chart, just like we all do, that you kind of have to, it's like going to the gym. You know, the guy next to you may be lifting whatever way more than you. And it takes you longer to get to that point, but you still are working. You're still working on it. You're still working. And we all come with different gifts as well. But then again, like Rick said, like, you know, otherwise, why would we be here? So the communication and social skills. Marcia, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay.
Mm.
Mercury. Mercury governs communication, perception, and reasoning. So that's a big deal, right? Because what if you have a Mercury that's got some, you know, aspect from Pluto or Neptune, or it's got a wonderful, you know, aspect from that is receiving like a trine, then this comes, you know, like really good speakers, uh, real like thought leaders, authors. They probably, I mean, it's very likely you see it. Obviously, you're going to see it in the chart. I talked about how I have a T squared of Mercury in Cancer at 29 degrees, and it's not something I ever really think about. But lately I thought about it. I thought, oh, no wonder. This is something I need to be aware of. And in the moment, not make everything so like it overwhelms me, the Cancer stuff. The Cancer, the thinking becomes clouded with this water. You know what I'm saying? And it's too much. It's not, I become irrational. So I'm just gonna mute Marcia, but something to look at in your own chart. A well-placed Mercury, like we talked about, yeah, supports clear communication, helping in emotional expression and social intelligence. That's so if you look at people's Mercury, we should do an episode on just Mercury. What do you think?
Let's do it.
You know, Deborah, before she left a message, and she
Yeah.
suggested maybe we can relate more of these in context. Maybe we can keep these ideals front and center and pick something out of the emotional intelligence to relate it to Neptune on Aries that is coming up.
Mhm.
Because that will certainly create a lot of fertile opportunities for exploring.
Oh yeah. And that's happening.
Self-focused too. Emphasis on the self in that as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And Neptune and Aries.
And right on a solar eclipse.
I know.
Right.
That's coming in with a bang.
And
It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It really is.
the Vedic New Year, everything at the same time.
It's so I think we talked about this last time that, you know, the calendar year started 3 months ago, but really the year is starting now. The year's starting March, April, the energy is going to pick up big time. This is a particularly
This year in
active
particular, yeah.
couple of months, but we did this year, we had a, we're still today, Pisces, Venus retrograded and is now in Pisces. And
Here we
we're
go
gonna,
again.
yes, we're going to experience, Venus and Pisces in retrograde for till the 12th of April. So whatever your Venus, if it's, prominent in your chart, or if it's really affecting you with this Venus retrograde, it's going to feel different than Venus and Aries did, yesterday. It's going to feel different. So,
Especially since there's such stark difference from going from the water to the fire and back from the fire to the water.
oh yeah. Yeah. I love when this happens. I don't always, there's times where I go through phases where I'm looking at it at the day's chart and my own chart. I look at them consistently, but then there's times that I don't. But what I love is when I feel a certain way and then I look at the chart and go, oh yeah, so Mercury just went into Virgo or whatever. So this explains why I feel, it's like I feel it before my rational mind knows it, because we're all under the influence of these planetary movements. So Venus is that relational planet, right? Empathy and relationship management. Venus rules love, harmony, and social grace. So what if you have Venus next to Saturn, Venus next to Pluto, or making a difficult challenge, or a beautiful, like Venus trine Neptune, Venus trine your sun. These are lovely placements. So, you can, like I know people that they literally walk into a room, they don't have to say a word. There's just something about them that they're just likable. People want to be near them. And it doesn't even matter. It could be your grandmother, the dog, and your cousin. People, they just likable people. That's a Venusian person. That's a Venusian person that probably has Venus, in a nice place in their chart. Bye, Linda. Take care.
See you, Linda.
Take care, Linda.
Certainly not a person that's going to have a difficult Venus, a strong Venus in Libra or Taurus, a challenge Venus. Yeah, so Venus in Aries acts very different.
That's me.
Yeah.
I've got Mercury and Venus in Aries.
In Aries.
Yeah.
So you've got a fighting spirit, and you can use that, again, like Rick said, you can use that however you want. You always have a choice. And maybe, 17-year-old Jane was different than, I can guarantee you, obviously, that the perception of how you probably expressed Venus in Aries was different than it is today.
I hope so. But,
Saturn, oh my gosh, I had Saturn on my moon the last year or a year and a half, and I remember Rick D telling me, well, you gotta grow up on a whole new level emotionally. And I do. I do. And I didn't. So yeah, emotional discipline. Emotional discipline is actually something I've been really trying to work on, because I know about astrology and I know Saturn's been on my moon. So like, for example, I don't really want to exercise. I don't really want to not eat the cookie if I want it. I want to do what I want to do when I feel like doing it. So this is, an example of that. Like I had this connection a couple of nights ago because I remembered, oh my gosh, because I remembered Saturn, is basically like, grow up, have some discipline, exercise boundaries in a healthy way. Be your own parent emotionally. So well placed Saturn.
Hugely well put. That's important. Because after we become 18, we have the opportunity to go ahead and recognize what was not caught or facilitated by our parents' devotion, and recognize that if we had missed something, we can study and learn ourselves to go ahead and fill in the gaps, because we can become aware.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There comes a point where you kind of have to go, well, now I'm a grown up, so I can't just keep blaming my parents for stuff, because we could all do that till the cows come home. And if you didn't have, I mean, who has perfect parents? Nobody does. But if you have things that you're still dealing with, at some point you just got to take responsibility that this is your life now. You get to choose how you live it. So a challenge Saturn, may indicate emotional suppression or difficulty trusting others. Saturn in Aries, afflicted by Mars or Uranus. That can be difficult because and I see this with somebody in my life, and it's almost like there's a sense of just really being kind of cynical about life. And you can't be too Pollyanna, but you can't be too cynical. It's usually somewhere in the middle works out better, but not everybody has that naturally. 12th house and Neptune, emotional depth and subconscious patterns. 12th house and Neptune influence emotional depth, intuition, and hidden emotions. Strong Neptune enhances empathy and emotional intelligence, and afflicted can indicate emotional confusion, escapism, and boundary issues. So I'm not sure if any of you experience or know anything about how your Neptune kind of influences your life, but I see this too. I've seen this. I remember somebody I knew had Neptune next to the moon, and remember him saying to me, but can't you feel what the other person feels so much that you almost, it's he had such a high level of empathy, but it was a lot, it was too much, it was a lot. And he had a drinking problem because it was just, it felt like he was like a raw nerve all the time. Maybe that's not the right way to put it, but in any case, that can really affect you, because how you perceive that 12th house. Oof, that 12th house. We're going to do an episode on just the 12th house in the next couple of months, because it's a big place. It's a big place.
Were we thinking about 8th house first?
We're doing 8th house first, but eventually, but then after that, at some point, we'll do 12. I mean, I'm sure it's some point we might do all the houses, but I have a special.
Those ones get a lot of attention by astrologers, though.
They do, because they're so complex and they're so interesting, and they can be the richest part of our lives, and in a way
very subtle yet powerful.
Oh my gosh, I'm a big 12th house person. I think Rick is probably a big 8th house person, or both, but
both.
I like both.
Yeah. I love both too. I just happen, again, I have this awareness because I struggle with some 12th house stuff, right? With my Neptune, with Chiron in the 12th house. So I become aware, like, oh, but you always have a choice. right? Like we always have a choice. And sometimes in our lives, we experience that shadow part or that part where we're going through that bridge into healing or into transformation or into real change. But eventually that turns into something that becomes something just beautiful, really can be healing, helping others, just all kinds of goodies are in those houses. But it may not look like that sometimes right off the bat, you know?
Yeah, and it can look good to someone who does not realize they're broken
Yeah.
because you feel like you're being so loving and kind, but you don't realize that some of that kindness may have been forged through trauma that made you tiptoe around everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So you're showing this tremendous empathy because your love language may be abusive to yourself. That is a difficult thing for people to tolerate.
Very
And
much
that's
so.
one of the reasons we need to really look at emotional intelligence, be more literate ourselves, hold space for people who we recognize are struggling, and open the conversations that they give you the opportunity, not because they ask, but because they feel safe enough to say something self-disclosing.
Yeah.
When something is shared that is self-disclosing, your fellow human being is reaching out to you. And that's the time to let your star wisdom shine.
Yeah.
Love them through
Yeah.
holding space and sharing friendship.
Because oftentimes that doesn't come naturally to some people, but they feel like, oh, you know, Rick is he feels that he or she feels a comfort level with you. So then they open up. That's sacred space to me.
Yes.
It's very special. It's very, very special. And yeah, I tend to really, that's, you know, when I talk to people about their charts, I find that a sacred space too. Like, because you see a lot. You see a lot when you're looking at somebody's chart. But yeah, that level of trust and safety that you feel with
Take care, Marcia. Much
Hi,
love to you.
Marcia. It's great to see you. We haven't seen you in a little while. Take care. um, so I think we went through the astrology. We went
Yeah.
through the astrology of it, and I'm glad we did that because it actually reminded me of a lot of things for my own self where I'm still in progress. I said to somebody today, because I've been going through some stuff, and I said a lot of stuff that I thought was so revealing, and I was almost it was almost embarrassing for me to admit. And but I was happy that I was saying these things out loud because they don't have this power over me when I say them out loud. And we're all human. I mean, I try
That
not
is the power of identifying your
yeah.
emotions. You cannot say it out loud until after you have identified what you feel.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be in touch with the feeling first. So
Yeah.
it may come easier in the Myers-Briggs for those who are feeling more than thinking, but that does not mean you can't go ahead and feel also. People who are thinking do feel.
Yeah.
This is true. This is very true.
So I know that there's so much more that can be said that we have prepped for, and I think we ought to bring more of these ideas forward. Jane, earlier I was thinking about our agrarian culture prior to the Industrial Revolution, how it really made an impact finding a space for the boys to use their energy. And it created a culture of do that was very performative. And there is this different experience with the girls to go ahead and allow them safe spaces to talk with their friends. And they could be maybe talking while harvesting or harvesting something in a closer knit space, or snapping beans as they're getting ready for dinner, right?
Yeah.
And the permission is encouragement. The boys didn't get that.
Yeah.
And that's where they are harmed by not being validated for having a heart. And that needs to shift.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's wonderful to see certain things happening online, certainly in Australia, where there are men probably in their 30s and 40s doing filmed podcasts or whatever that are working through their emotions. Recently, one of them talked about having an autistic son and the what he was learning, and he'd written his son a letter, and he read out what he'd written to his son, and it was his learnings and on what he was gaining from having this amazing autistic son. But he wept through this. I'm getting tingles telling you. He wept through this podcast. And it just popped up on my social, so I can't remember what it's called, but I know there's 2 or 3 of these, what I would call young men, but 30s, 40s, and they get guests in, and it is to really work on
Yes.
who they are and their emotions and all the levels of it. It's just beautiful. And I suppose I'm saying it so that we get it. It's out there, letting you all know that there are beautiful things happening. I mean, you know that anyway, but there are beautiful things happening.
Yes.
Thank
yes.
you.
Feel
Yeah.
free to go ahead and share some of those with me.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. When I
Facebook.
find it, I'll send it to you. Yeah,
Thanks.
good thinking, 99.
Yeah. There is one called Man Enough, and it's a group of guys. They look like they're 30s and 40s. There's one woman on the panel, and they do that on purpose so that there's a woman's perspective, but it's about what Jane was saying. It's just how they work through things in their lives, relationships and jobs, and oh, it's great. Oh, I love it. It's Man Enough. And it makes me so happy to see it because oh, these guys are relatively young, and
Yes.
they also challenge each other
Yes.
in good ways, in healthy ways.
It's so strong though. You just sort of, there's so much strength in it. And
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I've spoken to some people in this regard about the Greek heroes of old because of my work with Chiron. And I've been letting people know we all remember the violence of Sparta from the movie and the 300. But what people don't realize is it was 150 friendships. They were guys who always had each other's back. So that's what made them so tactically powerful, because they had eyes in the back of their head. They looked out for one another. We need to have more buddy systems.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little message from Chiron.
Yes.
Very much so. Very much
Yeah.
so.
Yes, absolutely. Were you getting ready to say something, John?
I think what I felt called to say is that I think the Aries energy that we're dealing with now, I mean, Aries is the most individualistic of individual signs, but Chiron's also in Aries right now too. And I was listening to another astrologer's podcast last night. Actually, it was two. Um, and they had a lot of insights though, but I think there is a lot in the United States around the sort of like, I mean, we all know the rugged individualism, the pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Um, and I think having Chiron, which we're actually in our Chiron return as a country too, which I kind of overlooked that fact. So on top of all this Neptune and Saturn, these incoming transits to Aries, we also have Chiron for the United States. So I think we're really being called to look at our individualistic approach to things. And I'm not saying it's all bad, but I think there is also the wounding there too, with Chiron that, we are going to see. I think we're being called to recognize where, we may have over isolated ourselves. So in some ways, what I see is that we are using our voice, we are saying, okay, I can do this all by myself, and maybe that's unhealthy. Another way I think we're seeing we really do need to kind of put aside our swords for each other and work together. And so there is this kind of like, stepping into our personal power, but also seeing that brotherhood, also seeing that
Right.
we do need to have each other's backs. As you mentioned, as far as like we can't do this all by ourselves, I mean, we can kill Social Security, but how's that gonna, what's that gonna do for us? Like, I mean, there was a point to that, right? That we do need a safety net. We can't all be pioneers out in the wilderness
Mhm.
trying to survive.
Erica shared a beautifully amazing comment about looking around comedians over time. They have a
Yeah.
way of reminding men about truths that are hard to express, but by
Yes.
joking about it. And I see the archetype of the jester, the comedian, is the common
Mercury,
manifestation.
Mercury.
And people don't realize there's a magical, metaphysical, spiritual experience
Yes,
of it
Eric.
because
Robin Williams.
they're walkers between worlds. And the two worlds they walked between. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Robin Williams, God bless them. The worlds they walked between is that they could walk in the village in the streets. And at the same time, the king's court, amongst the aristocracy. But the comedian, the jester, was the only one who could say something scathing with humor about or to the king's face that the aristocracy could never get away with
Right.
because of the way it was shared with such cutting wisdom. And I've known a couple comedians. Their intelligence is incredible.
Oh, it is. It is.
Some of them are young men that
Yeah.
I deeply admire. They're great guys.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so
That's-
true. They
that's
can
very much.
say,
Go ahead, Claudia. I didn't mean to
yeah,
interrupt.
they can say really, they can cut right to the truth. But the fact that it's funny is you take it differently, but it's still the truth.
It's a Mercury archetype. Mercury was, or Hermes was the only one of the gods that could go, I mean, could go down to the underworld. I mean, even like
Right.
see Hades, Pluto himself, and like wouldn't be affected by it. Everybody else, even gods, couldn't go there and like survive, but Mercury just was able to kind of like glide there, convey messages, and go on about his way. So, I mean, there's something about that, which also applies with Gemini too,
Yes.
I,
Yep.
Yeah.
and there are a lot of Gemini comedians.
And those Mercury Pluto connections are also good for taking the walking between worlds into mediumship and getting messages from those who passed on by that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, this has been a great night. I
Very
want
much
to
so.
thank, I
Absolutely.
want to thank Dr. John for
Oh,
helping
my
us
pleasure.
tonight because I know this is something that he's really very close to, and we appreciate it.
Always.
Yes, please.
Always and anytime,
good.
Claudia, Rick.
Yes.
Thanks,
Rick,
John.
of course. And let's take a minute to wish Jane a happy birthday. Happy solar return
Happy
to our
solar return.
favorite
Happy
Australian.
birthday.
Thank you.
Many happy
Thanks, you
returns.
guys. Thank you.
And
Happy birthday,
Happy
Jane.
birthday to
that's right.
you. Happy
Yeah.
birthday.
That's right.
Birthday.
Enjoy
Thanks,
it.
mate.
It's time
Happy
to
solar
extend it.
return. Good
Yeah.
thing it wasn't on the eclipse.
Yeah.
That's extra special,
Wow.
Jane.
This
Uh,
is
that'll
Who
be
gets a solar
interesting.
eclipse for their birthday?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Very, very
Be
big.
interested
very
to see there's already been big things happen. So in my head, in my heart. So
good. Yes,
Oh,
That's
yes.
we
been
can't
great.
wait to hear about it. Maybe
Thank
Um,
you. Lots of love to you guys.
Before
Yes.
anybody else leaves, I just want to take a moment and get your attention. If you happen to be on a computer, I know it's easier. We had a lot of information come through the notes today in the chat. It would be a great idea to go ahead and hit the three dots, the ellipse at the upper right hand corner, and hit save
save
chat.
it. Yeah, save the.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Because
yeah.
there's so much interesting stuff in this
Yeah.
chat, it would be
Good.
wise to save.
Yeah, yeah.
It
Okay.
ends up in the Finder because people save it and then they
Yeah, I've
can
done that.
find it.
That's good.
It's in the Finder.
You can
Thank
always
you.
search
Okay.
the date, like today being, look up like 3/27 or whatever, and it'll always come up that way. So
Thank
Great.
you. Thank you both. Thank you. So next
Mwah.
time we meet,
Birthday.
we'll be meeting April 10th. I won't be here, but Rick is gonna take over. My mom passed away a year
Oh.
ago,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
that the day after. So I'm gonna be with my family for the 1 year, but
Right.
we'll miss you
Good.
all, and I will be watching.
You will be missed, Claudia.
And I'll thank you all, thank you guys.
Yeah, bless you.
Yeah, I'll put out the calendar for April and hopefully even May, because I think we're getting close to figuring that one out as well. But thank you guys so much. I love you all.
Thank you.
And our
I'm so
scheduled
thankful.
topic for the 10th.
The 10th is, well, I was gonna leave it up to you. We said we were gonna do Neptune and Aries, but if you wanna, I'm sorry, Saturn and Aries. But if you want to dive into another topic such as the 8th house, let's talk.
Okay.
Because you may want to do something that you like better, because it's gonna be your evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Cool.
talk about it.
Okay.
Thank you all. This will
Love
be
you,
Bye,
our
lovely.
Claudia. Love you,
Thank you,
Rick.
Bye.
Jane,
Bye.
happy
Love you
birthday.
all.
Bye.
Erica,
Bye.
Good
May,
to
One of
see
you.
you.
all.
Bye.
Take care.
Love you guys.